Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Pod and the Pendulum, the show that covers horror movie franchises, one movie in one episode at a time. We are here this week for the first of our monster rallies, where Frankenstein's monster will be teaming up with one of the legends of the Universal Studios classic horror lineup. I'm your host, Mike Snoonian, and as always, I'm never going it alone. This week, I have a pair of co-hosts joining me for what's sure to be a knockdown, drag-out, slobber knocker of a battle here. And it is ironic we are recording this on Royal Rumble night.
I don't know what that means, but hell yeah.
God damn it, Steven. Can you get with the culture?
No.
Can you just it's, when 30 men enter, only one man can leave.
Oh.
It's like Highlander, but with tights and it's scripted.
Okay.
The
Highlander's
Thunderdome.
not scripted?
All right.
Two men go in, one man comes out.
Yes. Well, you've heard their voices. You hear them right now. Joining us again from the Disenfranchised podcast. Try that again. Joining us again from the Disenfranchised podcast. A man who is pure at heart and says his prayers by night, but becomes a wolf when the wolf bane blooms. Mr. Stephen Chewy Walrus.
Faro La, Faro Lee, Mike. Doing well. Glad to be here. Thrilled to talk about these two totemic titans of terror going toe-to-toe this week.
Excellent. Glad to have you on, my man.
Always glad to be here.
And also with us, as he has been for every Frankenstein movie. I don't know that he knew he didn't have to be on. I didn't say he didn't have to. I'm like, I hope he comes on for everyone.
Well,
I hope he does. And now that he does, I shouldn't have said that. So I'm going to cut that part out.
Brian's like, I have a choice? What?
Yeah. So hope, I just, because the shows are always optional, but I wanted you on for every single
Well, I
one.
wanted to be on for every episode. Yeah. I mean, come on.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
but I just feel bad sometimes because I'm taking up your Saturday. It's like you're like it's IHOP night.
It is IHOP night. Yeah,
oh, no.
IHOP and Big Lebowski tonight. But hey,
there's a Tutti Frutti Fresh and Fruity waiting for you at the end of this, Mike. Or Brian. Sorry.
Are you and your fam there's a movie critic who's doing every item on the Wonka menu for you guys doing that tonight in one night, ordering every
yikes. No, but hey, it's a good night, it's cheat meal night, and it's
I love IHOP
and I don't have IHOP very often. It's been a while, so that's what my daughter chose for her birthday, so happy birthday. And
thank God.
And good choice.
If she had chosen a vegan restaurant, would you choose
not
again?
Have chosen a vegan restaurant.
But if she did, would you be choose again?
Yeah,
you're
absolutely.
IHOP, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
that is the voice of Mr. Brian Kuiper from Bloody Disgusting, Manor Vellum, and the Movies for Life pod, our classic cinema guru.
Well, I got to say, Steven is quite the classic cinema guru as well, so I love going toe to toe with you. And hey, if you're the Wolf Man, I'm wearing my Frankenstein shirt. Me love dead, hate living, fight you. I don't know. I couldn't think of another good line from.
I'm just trying to die. That's all I'm trying to do.
That's all you're doing the whole movie.
All I'm trying to do is die.
Yeah.
That's right. So we are here to talk Frankenstein meets the Wolfman tonight, and we've all been on for some Frankenstein episodes so far. So we've kind of given our general overview of how much we love Frankenstein and the Universal monsters in particular. So I think we're going to dive right into the background.
Yeah.
Right?
Before that, though, I got to say this was sort of a holy grail for me to see for a while. I mean, it's I love Frankenstein. I love the Wolfman. Saw a trailer of them fighting in this movie, and I was like, I gotta see that,
Yeah.
And when I saw it, it was kind of disappointing how little they fought, but
this movie overpromises and underdelivers on that fight. Boy, howdy.
Well,
but there's a lot of good stuff leading up to it, though. It's Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, not Frankenstein,
it's not Frankenstein versus
the Wolfman. So.
That's true.
It's not Frankenstein versus. Yeah. It's not Frankenstein fights. It's they meet, and they do meet.
They do.
And they're kind of on the same side for a while.
Yeah.
it kind of gives you exactly what it promises. I don't see how it under
They
promise. Oh,
meet, they shake hands, they
yeah.
hang
They go
out
on
for
like
a
horse-drawn
while.
carriage rides
They
Yeah,
together.
drop a bunch of empty barrels out of the back of it.
they go dancing in the town square to that song.
Faro La Faro Lee.
Yeah, I mean,
That's why we had to cut all that Lugosi stuff, is because we had to make room for that 5-minute long musical number. Boy, howdy.
This is why we go for 3 hours.
but we digress. Okay, background.
So, all right, talking a little bit about how the sausage gets made for this one. We talked a little bit before about how by this point, Universal is kind of in like churning out the monster movies mode. Like they're kind of starting to make them for kids. They're kind of quickies, they're kind of cheapies, and they've wrung Frankenstein for all that it's worth at this point as far as a solo creature. So now it's going to be like team up movies, and that's what you're going to get for the back half here. And really, like for the back half of the Frankenstein movies we talk about, the monster is going to be like way in the background.
Yeah.
They're barely Frankenstein movies at all.
Right.
Yep.
So our film's writer learns the hard way, like you do not make jokes around studio executives because you might get roped into taking a job you don't really want. Coming off the success of writing The Wolfman, Kurt Siodmak was having lunch with that film's producer, George Wagner, when he commented, why don't we make it? And I think, Brian, you made this joke last time.
I think it was
What
Andrew
did you call this?
who filled us in
That's
on this
right.
one. This was actually something I wasn't aware of, so this was pretty
Okay.
exciting, new information to learn. So
It was, why don't we make Frankenstein Wolf's the Meat Man, or Frankenstein meets the Wolfman? And George did not laugh at that suggestion. George, being a producer, started to count box office receipts inside
Saw
of his
dollar
head.
signs in his eyes.
Yeah. He's like, if Frankenstein made $1 million and the Wolfman made $1 million, if I put two of them together, wouldn't that make $2 million?
Sort of like, if less is more, just imagine how much more would be. That's sort of the moment that happens here, and George Wagner and Kurt Siodmak are really like, they're the power players. They're the names that pop up over and over and over again in this resurrected, I guess the Universal monster renaissance of the 40s. And so you're going to see them all the way through sort of this era, just everywhere. Siodmak just shot to prominence with the Wolfman. He created so much of that mythos that we think of with werewolves now. I mean, that all started there. He just made it up. It wasn't like, oh, this is ancient legend or something like that. It was very much his doing. And that's why you have like Werewolf in London, which is a cool movie, is not really like that werewolf stuff that we think of at all. And so it's such a different movie. But the Wolfman creates that genre as it still exists today. And then George Wagner directed that movie, of course, and then was made into mostly producer for the rest of this run. So it's big names that are joining together for this film.
I love, like, I don't know when we would talk about this. Kurt had a long running feud with his brother Robert, who was a director. Like who was a director who, Steven, you and I talked about his film The Killers, one of the greatest film noirs of all time.
Yeah.
So fucking good. Yeah.
Where Robert refused to work with Kurt. And when Kurt wrote the first draft of Son of Dracula and suggested his brother Robert to direct it, the first thing Robert did when he was hired was like threw out Kurt's script and had him tossed off the picture.
Oh shit!
And like they never worked together, like till the day that he died. Like long running, like absolutely like would not work with him. And it wasn't like they didn't get along otherwise. It was like just like a sibling rivalry thing where he's like, nope, can't work together. Like always tried to one up one another.
Oh, wow.
So I found that fascinating.
That is fascinating.
That is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know when because I don't know if we're ever going to do the Dracula pictures. I don't know if we'd ever get to kind of mention that. We'll see. Who knows?
Look, if the fans demand it, we'll do it.
Coming in 2029.
Yeah, there you go.
So, yeah, I'd pick the Invisible Man before as a series before Dracula as a series,
or the Wolfman for that matter.
Well, we're kind of covering half of the we're covering most of the Wolfman series here,
all except for the original,
except for Werewolf of London, the original, and She Wolf of London. All the others
Wolf of London does not count. I'm sorry.
It's in the set. It's in the set.
It is. It is, but I maintain it does not count.
I've actually haven't gotten to that one ever.
Oh well, when you do, you'll understand why I don't count it.
Fair enough. All right.
So Siodmak basically he wanted to buy a new car. And he needed a writing job. So, every day at the commissary, Wagner's like has this chip to cash, and every day Wagner's like, "You buy the car yet?" And finally, when Kurt says, "Yep, I bought the car," Wagner congratulates him and says, "You have 2 hours to accept the job of writing Frankenstein. Woofs the meat man." So basically, that's how Kurt gets roped into. That's how Kurt gets roped into like taking this writing job, because after the Wolfman makes like nearly $1 million at the box office in 41, it's a foregone conclusion that there's going to be more chapters in that saga, especially after like Universal wants to turn Chaney Jr. into their new Karloff, because Chaney's goes on this run where he plays the Wolfman, he plays Frankenstein's monster, he plays the Mummy, he plays Dracula. So he plays. If he played the Invisible Man, he would have had a royal flush of the heavy hitters at that point, right?
Absolutely.
He's got the 4 big boys. So
yeah. I think the only reason he wouldn't have done the Invisible Man is because it just was, I think, a voice thing, because the voice is so important. So who do you hire for that? You hire Vincent Price, for example, to play that role.
Right. Where I think if it was something that required a lot of prosthetics, you could probably get Chaney in there in a heartbeat, and he would do it no problem. But Invisible Man is kind of antithetical to all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So here's my question for you guys, because you're much more well versed in this than me. So Universal's like they're teaming up, and they're watering down the horror roster at this point, and the movies are getting geared more to kids. But what else is going on in genre pictures? Because while Universal is doing this, other companies are filling the void that's left for the adults that want to watch something that's a bit more mature, maybe a bit more scary, maybe a little bit more psychological. Like, what's going on with the likes of like Val Lewton and RKO in the 40s?
Well, 42, RKO releases Cat People, which is essentially kind of like, hey, Universal has the Wolfman.
Right.
Let's do something about it, an animal thing. And so Val Lewton comes up with this ingenious idea of, okay, let's have this movie about a woman who at least believes that she turns into a cat. You never see a transformation. You never see concrete proof that she turns into a cat. Instead, it's all psychological. It's all very suggestive. Everything happens in the dark. Scariest scene in that movie, well, there are two. There's the pool scene, the famous pool scene where he's in the shadows, and then the street being followed in the street. Those are the big famous scenes. So anyway, that's a pretty big success for RKO. They follow it up with 3 movies. They actually make 4, and 3 of them are released. They release I Walk with a Zombie, The Leopard Man, and The Seventh Victim, all in 1943. And then they made Ghost Ship, but it wasn't released. Okay, it was buried. If I remember right, I think Val Lewton pissed someone off, and they said, "Fine, we're not going to."
Usually, how that works, yeah.
But they brought him back. So I mean, that's sort of like the I guess the quote unquote. I know everyone hates this term, but elevated horror of the period. That's the horror for adults. That's
part of. Sorry,
no, go on.
Part of the reason I think that is so successful is because if you look at the world writ large, World War II has just started.
Mhm.
And so, adult men wearing tons of makeup fighting each other is just not as scary
Yeah.
as, some of the stuff that Luton and RKO are doing. And so that becomes kind of the next wave of horror. And the Universal monster movies become kind of a passé thing as a result.
Well, and the thing is, Luton is essentially making horror movies that are noir films.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons why they still work so well, I think, too. Because noir is kind of always works. Something about it always works. And I think and it's just sort of naturally works with horror. And it's really effective. Those movies all of them at least have something to latch onto. And most of them, I mean, I think The Seventh Victim is like a legitimate masterpiece. That movie it's sort of buried. It's only got an out of print DVD, unfortunately.
That's a bummer.
It's one of the only. It's that and I Walked with a Zombie are kind of out in the ether somewhere. They're the only ones that haven't been released on Blu-ray. But let's see here. However, Universal isn't just doing monster movies; they're also doing they do like the Tower of London, which is essentially Richard III with a horror spin on it, which is kind of crazy. They do some Poe adaptations. And then over at Columbia, Karloff is making movies with Columbia that are, I don't know, they're kind of in the mushy middle. They're not quite kid movies, but they're not quite adult. There's something, they're Mad Doctor movies mostly. Before I Hang, there's a lot of hanging. The Man They Could Not Hang was another title. I've seen all of these, but then you also have the rise of the Poverty Row studios, like Monogram is releasing. They're releasing schlock. I mean, this is William Castle before William Castle and Roger Corman before Roger Corman.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Bela Lugosi's making a lot of those movies. He's making The Ape Man and Return of the Vampire, where he's essentially playing Dracula again.
Ape Man, another Wolfman ripoff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And then you have horror comedies really becoming a thing around this time too. This is even before they meet Frankenstein, there's like a ghost movie with Abbott and Costello, all kinds of things like that. But yeah, that's sort of what's going on. So, I mean, there's stuff that's sort of running the gamut between, just like now, frankly, there you have your schlock that's going straight to Tubi or whatever, no offense to Tubi, and then all the way up to, your A24, ultra cerebral slow burn stuff, I mean, so you've kind of got everything going on at this time. But one of the things that is true is basically all of it is low budget. Whether you're making for the majors or for the minors. So everything was made on a shoestring.
Got it. Yeah. So really not much has changed.
Exactly. They're
in 80 years.
Yeah. Yeah. In 80 years, we are still in that same boat. Yeah.
Yeah. When you talk about those like Poverty Row pictures, like I know you mentioned Corman, but the thing about Corman is like folks like Dante and James Cameron would come out of that camp. Like they would get their start working with him. Jack Nicholson got his start working. Absolutely. In Corman Pictures. Yeah. Like so many.
Martin Scorsese got his start.
Yeah. So
Steven Spielberg. Yeah.
Well,
right. Did anyone get their, come out of Poverty Row and go on to have like more illustrious careers, or are these all kind of like Jack Smithy type of like anonymous quickie embarrassment? Like I heard like Lugosi would like kind of like appear in these pictures and it would be like an embarrassment for him to have to like debase himself to appear in pictures like these.
It was the studio to Poverty Row pipeline was usually one way.
Yeah.
I say usually because there are odd stories like Orson Welles did go back to studio filmmaking after he made a couple pictures for Poverty Row, but he was Orson Welles. Right. Typically it didn't work that way. And it was kind of akin to like the movie to TV pipeline in the 80s. Like there were film actors and there were TV actors. And if you were a film actor that debased themselves to go on TV, there was very little chance that you were going to go back. And that's kind of what Poverty Row was around this time. It was what you had to do to basically make a quick buck. Yeah. And that's about all it was a quick buck.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Ed Wood is sort of the poster child for Poverty Row pictures, and he's kind of the only one we really remember, right? And he was even a little later. He was the 50s, but this was, you didn't get a lot of people getting their start and going into the majors from here. So, yeah.
So moving on from there then, like Roy William Neal, he's tapped to direct. Kind of a workman-like director, did some horror, a lot of Westerns. I would say workman-like, not known for necessarily having a real style. But when you look at him here, he kind of does tap into, and we'll talk about it when we talk about the movie, he does a really nice job tapping into what made those early Frankenstein movies work well. Like it does feel much more atmospheric. There is that kind of sense of like gothic horror to it. There is like once you get to like the Frankenstein, like the Valeria or Valseria. I always kind of get the name of the village incorrect, but basically where the Frankenstonians hang their hat. Where you get to there, that is basically it does kind of have that otherworldly, out of time, out of place feel to it. That I think was really missing with Ghost of Frankenstein, which felt really flat. There's more shadow to it. I think the opening of it looks really well, but he was known for not having really any sense of humor. And I think that there's kind of a missed opportunity here. And I found this anecdote in the book Universal Horrors, where they're talking about his experience filming the movie Wall Street in 1929. Where there's a scene where one of the characters basically playing a ruthless tycoon manipulates an underling into like jumping off the top of a building and splattering on the sidewalk. And the guy like looks out the window and is like, well, I didn't think he had the guts to do it. And everyone on the crew starts kind of cracking up laughing at the gallows humor of that.
Right.
And William Neal is like, I don't know what's so funny. Like, I don't get it. Like, where's the humor? Like, he had no idea. And that would kind of follow him around. Like, he's like, I don't see any humor in any of this. Like, really just like total blank face. Like, so the idea of like Bela Lugosi stumbling around half blind, grunting, just couldn't find the humor in that. Because did nothing for him.
Yikes.
So, this is what the first of what Universal is going to call their Monster Rally pictures, where they're going to combine like the legendary and the still bankable characters. Like they are definitely not as scary as they were in their earlier iterations, but they're still bankable. People are still turning out for them. The next movie, we're going to get 4 monsters. You get to House of Dracula, we have 5. You get to Abbott and Costello, you get 3. 4 if you count a little cameo there at the end.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first cinematic shared universe, right?
It pretty much has to be.
Yeah, I can't.
I don't know what else would qualify, honestly.
Yeah, I can't either.
Unless you count the trio of Fritz Lang films, Dr. Mabusa, The Gambler, Testament of Dr. Mabusa, and M. That might because the
M, you would consider M to be part of that?
The inspector from M is the cop in Testament of Dr. Mabusa. So that kind of counts as a cinematic shared universe.
That's true. That's true. That's a stretch. That's a single character,
I'm with it. Hey, if that counts,
it's all good.
Then that would be it.
Well, sort of like the Peacemaker, or not the Peacemaker, Out of Sight and Jackie Brown, because
Michael Keaton
plays the same character in both movies, that kind of thing. Yeah. So. But this is on a much larger scale than anything like that had come for sure. For sure, I mean, this is like obvious. We're intentionally making this all part of the same thing here now.
Right.
Yeah. And the continuity, I think is fair to say, is very loose when it comes to these films, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
you get to the next picture
I feel like
and
there's an
Dracula
attempt
has
here,
a top hat.
but like nowhere else.
Right.
Because I mean, you get references to Wolfman and references to kind of references.
Ghost
to
of
Ghost,
Frankenstein.
Ghost
he
of Frankenstein
burns.
does a pretty good job.
Okay, Ghost of Frankenstein kind of continues the continuity pretty well, but one of the things with this one is like, okay, he burns down in the house at the end of Ghost, right? I mean, they show him. It was a house, and then they show him now, and he's in a castle,
right?
And he's like frozen in ice now, and
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's
because fire definitely turns to ice in one of its states.
Right.
Do some math here real quick. No, that checks out. Well done.
Yes, that definitely. I definitely know 6th grade science. That checks out.
I mean, and you see his skin like coming off his face at the end of the last movie.
Yes.
It's like Freddy Krueger level burnings going on here, and it's just like, oh, he's fine. We're all fine here. Thanks. Good.
But also, like, the villagers make it out like Frankenstein had been terrorizing the town for years.
Right.
Like, he's like Freddy Krueger, right? Yeah. And that is, like, I think Andrew, it's either you or Andrew that mentioned it during, like, the Ghost episode, that it's kind of like the beginning of Ghost is kind of like how Springwood was in Freddy's Dead.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really
all
good
of the
comparison.
Clever observations came from Andrew in that episode.
Andrew was really good. Andrew was excellent. Yeah. We definitely need him, and he's coming on again. Yeah. We need to have him on more. That goes away here, to a large degree, where now they're like, oh, he's ruined this town. And it's like he was there for like half a day. Like it's kind of like just kind of like passing through the town for one day. And he kind of spent 90% of his time at Ludwig's house, like not really bothering anyone in the village, you know? Yeah. He did kidnap Maria, but twice. No, only once. The first time she asked for him to
that's true.
Yeah.
Pick her up and help get her ball. And again, I said this last episode, 90% of the creature's problems could be avoided if he just didn't randomly pick up little girls.
Yeah. If I mean, look, we all know Frankenstein, like Wu-Tang, is for the children. Yeah. Like Wu-Tang, like Gamera, for the children. Yeah. But like maybe just like keep away from the kids, because that's just the source of all these misunderstandings.
Stephen, you could have avoided a lot of legal problems if you didn't randomly pick up little. No, I'm kidding.
We all could, quite frankly. Look,
I should probably cut.
People in glass houses should not throw stones, Mike. Come on.
Yeah. That's true. But no, really, the continuity is not very tight in these movies.
To put it mildly, this is more about how many monsters can we fit. This is more like an X-Men 3 situation. How many characters can we put on screen at one time? Not with where did this guy come from? Like, again, there's like an attempt here, but not much of one. And by the next one, fucking forget
it makes the Halloween franchise look like a well-oiled machine.
I gotta say though, the continuity in the Universal movies is like, is incredible. It's airtight compared to the Hammer. The Hammer continuity is nuts.
Oh yeah,
it is. I mean, the first two really do link together, but after that it's like forget it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, the character is like not even the same. And it's wild. Yeah. So
let's talk a little bit about who reappears in them again. Lionel Atwill does return for the third of 5 pictures. And Brian, you had asked this last time, and then we kind of like brushed over it a bit, like, because this is right when his legal troubles are kind of like right at their apex. As this is in production in October of 42, this is when he's sentenced to 5 years of probation for perjury. So it probably explains like why he is getting, after like 2 pictures of having like a pretty substantial supporting role, like would have been not top of the line billing, but would have been a pretty juicy supporting role. He's got a pretty insignificant role as the mayor this time around.
It's like enough to appease the Screen Actors Guild
Yeah.
requirements, and that's about it. It seems like,
Yeah.
it's like, hey, we have them in contract, you have to put them in something,
Yep.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's hard to say, because like some things you read and it's like after he was convicted, his career went downhill. He appeared in Poverty Row pictures and that was about it. But then you read like there are parts in roles he was supposed to appear in. He doesn't appear in two more. He appears in House of Dracula and House of Frankenstein. He had to bow out of pictures because of health problems at the end.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
he had a pretty sad 46. He passes away from cancer. He had just remarried. He had just had a son. And it's a pretty sad end. Like I don't have it in front of me, but I read about one of his friends visiting him a week before he passed, and he said like his soul wasn't at peace. It was very angry because he wanted to watch his son grow up, and he wasn't going to have that opportunity. So Atwill was it's kind of a tragic figure in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I would agree.
A lot of it is self-inflicted.
Yeah, that's
Sure.
true. That's true.
So,
Uh,
and also tragic. Dwight,
I was just
Brian,
going to say exactly that. Speaking of tragic stories, Dwight Fry is, I mean, for me, he's the best part about Dracula. He's one
Yes.
of those things about Frankenstein, the original 31 version, that is so great. Is Fritz, and
Yep.
he's relegated to a lot smaller role in Bride
Yeah.
as Carl, but he's still memorable. He's got these little things. He
Yep.
pops up in The Invisible Man as a reporter. I don't think he's even
He has
credited in that one. And
he has that great line couple great lines in Bride where he's
Yeah.
like, how about, we go turn ourselves in. This is no life of a murder, And and he's a fresh brain.
Right.
It's
like,
what happened to him in the years between Bride and Meets the Wolfman?
I mean, it looks, from what I can tell, it looks like he's just getting relegated to smaller and smaller parts. And I don't know if that was per his contract or something else, but he kind of just gets relegated to smaller and smaller roles as he goes. He plays nameless villagers in both Son of Frankenstein and Ghost of Frankenstein. I think he's the one that suggests they blow up the castle in Ghost.
Yeah, he is.
So like he just kind of pops up there, but he's got way more to do in this one. And actually his character has a name in this one as well. But I mean, I'm looking over his filmography now, and it's kind of just a lot of he's working consistently. It's just probably in uncredited roles or in roles where he's like kind of cut out of or just goes uncredited. Right up until his death. I know in the 40s, he starts to toggle back and forth between stage work and screen work, just wherever he can find work, I think.
Yeah.
And then once World War II starts, he gets hired on as a tool designer at Lockheed, and then eventually dies on a bus.
Yep.
Has a heart attack on a bus and dies later in 43.
Yep. On the bus to work, as I recall, I think that's right. He dies. Yeah. It's just it's such a sad story for someone who, I mean, every time that I watched one of these movies and I saw Dwight Fry show up, I mean, I remember vividly just watching, because I was familiar with Dracula and Frankenstein pretty early on, pretty young, but I got to most of the rest of them later. And when Dwight Fry would show up, I was like, oh yes, it's Dwight Fry. And I was so excited about that. And then just to see him get smaller and smaller roles was so sad to me. And to hear, years and years later that's how he died was just heartbreaking to me. So.
Well, that's the thing about so many of these movies. Like, and one of the actors I pulled up, like Tom Stevenson, reappears in this movie. He was like the first victim of the Wolfman in the Wolfman. He's the gravedigger. And here he plays one of the grave robbers. Like he's the one that escapes. So when you look at these movies, like the Universal horror movies, there seems to be like this really small troop of persons. Like Lionel Atwill is one that appears. We mentioned Dwight Fry.
Yeah.
Like Edward Van Sloan would appear in
Right.
so many of these movies. There is the police inspector, and I'm just trying to dig up his name right here, but he appeared in Inspector Owen, played by Dennis Howey, who would appear in a number of like Sherlock Holmes films in the same exact role, basically, like to the point where his son, retelling the story of them making this movie, like joked that he had said his dad probably thought he wandered into the wrong set and thought he was filming a Sherlock movie. Why do they have such a small pool of performers to choose from? Because it seems like they're just going to like, there are some things like Evelyn Ankers wasn't asked back for this movie to play the role she had played in Ghost of Frankenstein, because she had just played the love interest of Larry Talbot in The Wolfman, and they thought that might be confusing. Like it almost becomes incestuous, like how many of these persons are getting recycled. Like why are so many of the same people getting like cast and recast over and over in these quickie movies?
I think that was just, Universal had their stable of contract players and they could pull from, and not a huge group necessarily. I mean, so like we noticed another character like Hans from the first movie also plays one of the monster's victims in Son and things like that as well. So, but I think people also kind of got used to seeing him, and it's like, oh, hey, Edward Van Sloan is in this. So if he's Dr. Van Helsing in Dracula, I mean, it's kind of shorthand to put him as Dr. Waldman in Frankenstein.
Yeah.
I mean, because you kind of get how those two things go together. Things like that, Fritz and Carl make a lot of sense to be the same actor, and frankly, Renfield as well. There's all these kinds of things that like that. And I think people would
like
latch on to familiar faces,
So like an early version of like somebody like a Wes Anderson always bringing in like a Jason Schwartzman,
Bill Murray and stuff,
and having like that,
sure,
and like Owen Wilson.
Yeah, well, I mean, Coppola always was hiring Robert Duvall and Gene, and Al Pacino, people like that for a while. Marlon Brando always showed up in a bunch of his movies, things like that.
It's less the director doing it and more the studio, because
the studio
are the auteurs at this point. Yeah,
the studio is like you don't have the directing auteurs like you would in the 60s.
You do, really, but they're rare and they don't get the freedom to work within that studio system.
Right.
So.
Right.
A couple notes on the brawl, which we'll talk about. Like most of it's handled by a pair of stuntmen: Eddie Parker standing in for Lon Chaney, Gil Perkins standing in for Bela Lugosi. Eddie Parker definitely made some comments about Leona Massey's like nighting wear. Like when he had to like kind of carry her around, like he's like, geez, you can kind of like see right through it. Like you kind of want to carry her around and take her somewhere to be alone. It's like, oh, Eddie.
Yikes,
Eddie, no. Eddie, no.
No, Eddie, no.
No, but the two men were told by Neil, like, just work out what you want to do. Let him know what was going on, and he would roll the camera. Like Neil would kind of give them a few ideas, like, this is how we want to start it. This is a couple like big pieces. And then here's how we want to, a couple of things you want to capture. But by and large, like the two stuntmen had a lot of creative freedom.
Kind of like a proto They Live.
Yeah, kind of like that, except a lot shorter.
Right. Significantly shorter. Disappointingly shorter.
Yeah. Because these monsters are meeting.
Right.
Not necessarily fighting.
Correct.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Obviously.
Yeah.
And what do we think? Like Jack Pierce is back again to create the makeup for Lugosi and Chaney. I'll ask you guys, what do we think of the makeup job here for Lugosi specifically?
Well,
how does he look under that monster makeup?
Well, the thing is that makeup was originally designed for Karloff's face. And so anyone who's not Karloff just looks weird in it. I'm sorry. I mean, I think when it's played for comic effect, like Fred Gwynn, I love him as Herman Munster, and it works in that. I think Glenn Strange is probably, he's the second. He does okay with it.
Sure.
Lugosi's face is just so round, and
It
it's just sort of
is.
short, and it that's the thing. Karloff had a really, really long face,
Yeah.
and big chin and everything. His nose sort of just worked with that makeup. And Lugosi's, he's got his great. He was in Hungary. He was like a leading man. He was considered one of the most handsome men in his homeland, and he has the cleft chin, and and frankly, it just kind of looks silly.
It says a lot about Hungary.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I mean, also, if you look up the early pictures of him, though, he's a very handsome young man. But
he is.
Apparently went to a screening of Black Cat later in his life and yelled audibly for the entire audience, "What a handsome bastard I was!" Like,
I believe that. Well, one of the things that's funny is, the makeup that they used, because in the first movie, Karloff took out his bridge work, and so Pierce shaded in to make it look a little bit more cavernous.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that became a tradition. So by this movie, it kind of looks like he just has a mole.
It looks like the Cindy Crawford mole.
That's like the beauty mark. It's ridiculous looking. So I'm sorry, the makeup's just not right for Bella's face.
It looks goofy.
Yeah,
it looks goofy.
It's not. You're right. He looks too round.
Yeah.
It just, it doesn't. I think Chaney works a lot better in Ghost. At least looks better in the makeup.
He's a really, really big man.
That helps.
Yeah, though Lugosi was a lot taller than I ever thought he was. To be honest, when I saw pictures of Karloff and Lugosi together, like standing in their tuxedos, whatever, I was like, oh. It was shocking to me to discover that Lugosi is actually a little taller than Karloff. I always thought that Karloff was just like this towering, huge man, but he really wasn't that big. No. And
he was 4'11". Those boots
they were that big. Yeah, he was really something. He was like 5'10". You caught me off guard. He was in real life. He was actually like 5'10". I think.
I thought he was like 6 foot even. I think he was like an even
or something
6.
like that. Yeah. So they were actually pretty close in height. So because I always thought, he's so huge, as a kid, and then, so. I mean,
well, poor Bella too is like almost 60.
Yeah, he turned 60 on the set. Yeah.
And the costuming is about 35-40 pounds. So he actually gets diagnosed with exhaustion.
I believe it.
When he is doing this, because he's just like carrying around all this extra weight. So he's an older man, and he's not in the best physical condition. Like he's kind of lived a hard life.
Yeah.
Knowing what we know about Bela Lugosi.
This is before the morphine problem, right?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure when the morphine problem started in earnest, to be honest with you.
Fair.
Yeah.
I will say, like, the werewolf effects in this are outstanding. I think they're a step above.
They're better than the Wolfman.
Definitely.
And you get 2 on camera like transformations, and they're like legit fantastic.
They're great. Yeah.
Well, the face one is so good because, he's laying on that pillow, and, they made the pillow out of plaster and stuff like that, so it wouldn't change. And it just looks, it's just miles ahead of the one, because in the Wolfman, they show his feet for the first one, and you can see the pant legs moving all over the place, and it's like clearly lap dissolves and everything. And here it's still clearly lap dissolves, but somehow, I mean, I just think it's so much better. And I think part of what's so great, I mean, Pierce, it's clear that the Frankenstein makeup, I think, is the most iconic. I think that that makeup will always be the one that he's remembered for, but it's also a compromise. It's also the one that he did with Karloff's face and with James Whale. And I mean, so it wasn't just Pierce. The Wolfman is Pierce. The Wolfman is his makeup. His specialty was doing hair. He'd done a
Mhm.
lot of hair stuff. He was originally going to use that makeup for Werewolf of London, and Henry Hole said, "You're covering up too much of my face."
No way. Yep.
So this was his design. This was his passion to do this. And you even see, like the Lugosi makeup on Island of Lost Souls, the hair makeup on all those movies on all those characters in that movie. You can see how much he loved doing, like hairy monsters. And so
Mhm.
it's a brilliant makeup. It's iconic, almost as iconic as the Frankenstein
Yeah.
makeup. And
Yeah.
it's one of his best, and it's great.
It is.
So the original idea was Chaney, and they floated this around, and it was quickly abandoned. But the idea was to have Chaney play both the Wolfman
And the
and the
monster.
monster,
Yeah.
Right.
which I'm not quite sure how feasible that would have been. It was quickly abandoned. And again, that would have been a lot of time in the makeup chair. That would have
It
been
would have been.
crazy.
I think that and Chaney's alcoholism were the two main reasons why they decided not to go that route.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there have been movies where, the actor splits the screen and you play
Mhm.
both parts, that kind of thing had happened.
Sure.
Even including a James Whale movie, actually, The Man in the Iron Mask, where
Mm.
an actor played both
Mhm.
characters. And Peter Cushing played the stand-in. He was the
How
stand-in on
yeah.
that, which is an
Well,
interesting
that's
thing.
awesome.
So
Yeah.
how much is Chaney in the makeup? I know when they have the close-ups he is. So when they're in the streets of London, for
Mhm.
example, and you see, because it's a very physical
Yeah.
performance, it's a very almost like a gymnast performance where he's pouncing on all fours, for example.
Right.
I have a hard time because Lon Chaney Jr. is a very large
Yeah.
man, and he's not, especially in this movie, you start to see there's some wear and tear in him. There's definitely he's bulked up a little
Yeah.
bit,
He looks like a sentient hangover
punchy.
in this movie.
He looks punchy,
Yeah.
for lack of a better. How much of that is Chaney doing some of that work? Not necessarily just in the fight at the
Sure.
end, but also when he's running about in the woods or running about in the street versus Eddie Parker. Do we have any sort of idea, or is that just lost to time?
As far as I know, that's just lost in time.
Okay.
Because the assumption is that Chaney plays the Wolfman.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just kind of always been the feeling. They did alter the makeup slightly from the first movie,
Mhm.
in one respect in particular, the feet. Because in the Wolfman, his feet are sort of they have a rigid boot, so his feet are at an angle, so it looks more animal like haunches,
Yep.
where that's not in this one or any of the others. So he's moving differently in this one than he
Okay.
is in the others. But you're right, the athleticism is pretty surprising if it's him, and there's a possibility that it's not. I would
Yeah.
guess,
Yeah.
yeah,
That'd be
so,
my guess.
yeah. But
I
I
hadn't
never
thought
really
about
thought
it.
about it either. I mean, to really watch it and analyze it and go through and say, because one of the unfortunate things about the sequels Beyond Bride is there are no commentaries. You don't
Yeah.
get the David J. Skull and Greg Mank commentaries that you get on the other ones
Yeah.
that are so detailed, where you just
Right.
find out
Yeah.
everything about every frame of the movie, which
Yeah.
is a shame.
No, this movie is one of three on the Blu-ray.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's this and the House movies, and
yeah,
which is surprising just because there is a lot of meat on all three of these. There
sure,
was a surprisingly more to this one, researching
yeah.
it than expected, which is why we're nearly an hour in
We
after I'm
haven't even
yeah,
talked
we'll
about the
be
movie yet. Yeah,
which we're about to in one moment here. I
yeah.
just did want to note Hans Salter is back to score it.
Mhm.
There are definitely cues that have been recycled from the
Yes.
Wolfman and from other Universal. I mentioned this in the Ghost episode. There during the lightning scene, there were moments that I'm I hear scores of later on Rocky. The going the distance, Bill Conti maybe being influenced. And I think I meant to DM you, Brian, and it ended up in the main Slack.
It did.
There is I'm telling you, there's at the end of the main title,
Okay.
there is this multiple bell that's ringing. And I'm like, that is the end of Going the Distance. Like that is the end of like round 14 in Rocky.
Okay.
Go ahead and
You
okay.
know, I got to
And
pay
I'm
more
like,
attention.
there's
I got
no way that Bill Conti.
You even told that.
And then I'm
You even
thinking,
said that before I watched the movie, and I didn't catch it. So yeah,
okay.
but I
And I'm
believe
thinking
you.
like Bill.
You've seen Rocky a lot more than I
No,
have. So
God, it's so
yeah,
good. Let's pause right now and go watch
yeah.
Rocky.
Sounds
Come
good.
back.
Gotta fly now.
God, that movie is so fucking good.
And if
All
you want to
right.
hear Mike's thoughts on that, check out Movies for Life.
That's
Yeah,
right.
because we had a
We do that.
we had
That's a
a
fun
great
episode
conversation about that.
where I just like rambled for like
No, it was
3 hours.
awesome. That was so much fun.
I did the same about Citizen Kane,
You did the
Mike.
same
Don't
about
worry.
Citizen Kane, and that is another great episode. So hey, plug right in the middle here. Check out Movies for Life. Both Mike and
Absolutely.
Steven
Plugging.
have been on as guests talking about two of their favorites. So Rocky and
Yep.
Citizen Kane.
So let's talk this then. Let's talk Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Doesn't fight, not fights.
Not versus.
Not versus.
They do fight, but it's toward the end.
Yeah.
I would say they tussle.
There's a row.
They wrestle.
They tussle. Yeah. So
It's not
You
the
know, I had
knockdown
this-
drag out that you made it sound like at the beginning, but yeah.
yeah.
No.
I had this talk with my mom today because, like, we were talking about like boys versus girls in like middle school and like how it's different and like because middle school girls can be vicious, like they really can.
Yes.
Correct.
They can make me cry.
I don't go near teenagers at all. They scare me.
No.
They're the scariest thing on the planet, quite frankly.
Terrifying. Like middle school boys can get in massive fights,
Uh-huh.
like wail on each other to the point where like like it hurts to watch it, and then the next day like be best friends again.
Absolutely.
I don't see that with like young women.
No.
And you know what? Good for young women. Hold those grudges.
The most vicious fight I ever saw. I was in the middle of the hallway, and it took like 5 teachers to break this thing up. And as I was walking by where the fight had been on my way to class, I saw a clump of hair in a pool of blood. And that was the moment that I realized that girl fights are not the same as guy fights.
Well, I'm not even talking about like physical fighting. I'm talking about like verbal assassination.
Oh, sure, that too.
I
but even
have been
physical
around
fights,
some-
though.
I have been around some like young women that are like the John Wilkes Booth of verbally taking down their classmates. It is like
the biggest physical fight I saw in junior high was a couple of girls like wailing on each other, and I remember.
But were they friends the next day? Is my point.
Absolutely
No.
not.
No.
I'm pretty
with
sure they were
guys,
suspended.
I feel like
Right.
But I mean, like with guys, the next day, like they can be like buddy. I see that happen all
which
the
is
time.
crazy, but it's true.
And my point is
It's
like
true.
my point in this like kind of misogynistic and sexist rant that I just went on, because it a little bit is.
Well, the
and I
movie is a little bit
apologize for
too,
that.
so that's okay.
It
Yeah.
is. Because I'm speaking in generalities
Sure.
here. I feel like the next day, like once Frankenstein and the Wolfman wash ashore, right? They would look at each other and be like, bro, it ain't that deep. Go to IHOP, get like a triple stack of chocolate pancakes, and like they would buddy up. They would like bump fists and be like, all right, on to the next town. You know?
And Frankenstein says, hey, you know what? I'm having a house party. You should come. And then we get House of Frankenstein.
do
House
it.
of
We
Frankenstein.
do.
That's right.
You know? Then Dracula would show up in that stupid fucking top hat.
tell us how you feel about the top hat, Mike.
Oh my god, man, it's so dumb. All right. But you know what's not dumb? The beginning of this movie.
Oh, it's good. It's real good.
Because
real good,
you know, we were talking about like dismissing the 40s Universal monster movies and stuff for kids, but like the opening of the Talbot Crypt, I think is among the better scenes in terms of suspense and terror in the Universal canon.
It's so good.
Like you have like not only a great looking graveyard,
Yeah.
but like the wind whipping through the interior, like it's the way it's played by the two grave robbers, like they're legit scared to be there. The moon shining in through on the coffin, like it's aces all around, right?
And then that hand reaching up out of it, like just the way that it's shot and the way that it's filmed, maybe some of the best filmmaking in this movie. Although this definitely feels a lot, visually at least, so a huge step up from Ghost, which was just
Yeah.
so
All of it is
flat.
My issue with Ghost of Frankenstein is that everything, I mean, the lighting, the acting, the story, everything about it is flat. Whereas here, and you have just a visual style set up right from the beginning. And I tell you, as soon as this scene starts, right at the beginning, you see the angles are, they're dynamic. The camera
Yeah.
is dynamic. The shadows, the design, just the contrast between dark and light is just like it's visually interesting. And then by the second scene, you have like these Michael Curtiz style shadows.
Right.
When the nurse opens the window, it reminds me of a shot in Casablanca when Rick opens the safe. I mean, it's just like that kind of shadow play, and
Bringing the noir elements back.
yeah, exactly. And it just looks like it belongs to the franchise in a way that Ghost doesn't. Because the whale films and I think Son of Frankenstein all have these really dynamic visuals to them.
Sun is all German expressionism.
Totally, yes.
Hook it up to my veins, yes, please.
Yeah, Sun is very German expressionism, and so that is sort of brought back in here, and it just helps it immensely. Even though the story is a little bit goofy. I mean, it doesn't really matter because you're just kind of drawn in by how it looks at least at the beginning, so yeah. I really find that to be such a refreshing change after sort of slogging our way through the last film.
And even the story they're telling as they're in there, like he's covered in wolfsbane, and why does the corpse look so good?
Right.
And you're like building that anticipation as it goes. And when Talbot grabs at grave robber number 2 and he looks over at him and is like, help me, and the other guy just runs out terrified. I think it's like a great little addition to that as well. And you have the lantern being knocked over, and that it can be very easily you go up in flames in there, so you have like an out as to like why there might be no body that's left inside of there because everything could have gone up. So you have like some actual logical storytelling and not just something that is like, this is a dumb movie for children. Right. So like, don't worry about it. Like Ciedomac has some like smart storytelling choices whenever he's dealing with just like the Larry Talbot stuff.
And that's his real strength. He wrote this. It feels like he wrote this as a sequel to The Wolfman.
This is what it is. It really is a Wolfman sequel.
And because you're with Talbot for so much of the movie.
Frankenstein, the monster doesn't even show up until minute 35. I clocked it.
It's only a 65-minute movie, something like
73.
That. 73.
73.
Yeah. Okay.
So almost halfway through the running time.
Yeah.
And then you get, the other titular character. So it's absolutely a Wolfman sequel that Frankenstein just kind of gets, or the creature, I guess, gets shoehorned into.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess a Frankenstein did meet the Wolfman.
Mm-hmm.
Leona Massey's character.
Absolutely.
She is a Frankenstein. So it should be called, you're going to get that blowhard. It should be called The Monster Meets the Wolfman. I'll cut that part out because it just slows the show down. I just feel like Ciedomac whenever he's writing about Talbot. And I think you have like, Chaney doesn't have a lot of range, but he certainly has a lane here, and he is great in this lane.
His portrayal of
it's haunted.
It is, and it's the reason why the Wolfman is my favorite of the Universal monsters. Mm-hmm. Like, it's one of the main reasons I wanted to come on and talk about this movie in particular is because of Chaney's performance, which I think is incredible. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's playing a man who is wrestling with these demons, whereas he himself as a person, as an individual, is wrestling with his own demons. And so there's this kind of meta layer to the character. I also just I'm a sucker for any kind of duality within a character. That's why I love like the Incredible Hulk and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and all that stuff. Like, I love the fact that he's wrestling with the beast within, with these inner demons. And I think given what he's gone through and what he will continue to go through for the rest of his life, he feels oddly perfect for this role. And every time he I think he only plays it like 3 times. The original film here and in Abbott and Costello. Unless I'm mistaken, I think he only.
No,
No,
he's
he's
a
the
Wolfman
Wolfman in the
all the
next
way
two as
through.
well.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's
is he? Okay, good.
yeah.
You got
Okay.
Yeah.
at least you got 2 more.
He's
Okay.
Because he's going to be in
he-
House of.
yeah,
He doesn't play it much in House of Dracula.
Okay.
Like he's quote unquote cured pretty early on in House of Dracula.
Yeah.
And then
I haven't seen those
not
yet,
cured,
so I don't know.
And then he's not cured in Abbott and Costello meets.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Right. I do know
Yeah.
that because I've seen Abbott and Costello. I've not seen, and I'll be back for Abbott and Costello.
Excellent. He was the only actor to play the monster all in every time it showed up to play the wolf. He was the only one that played he was the only actor to play the Wolfman, and he was the only one who ever did. So that's
Nice.
he played it every time, and that's the only time that happened. So
Which is funny because like it's the one character because anyone can be the Wolfman. Like Bela Lugosi plays a werewolf in the Wolfman, like briefly, right? So when you think about it, like it's the only character that really except for maybe the Gillman in Creature, because there could be more Gillmen.
We just don't see.
I guess did Rico Browning play? That I could be mistaken. I'm not sure if he played the Gillman in all 3 movies or not.
All I'm thinking is like what I mean is like you could do other Wolfmen movies with characters. Like Larry Talbot.
Yeah,
you could easily have like Larry Talbot. One of his victims could come back as like a werewolf if for some reason you didn't want to bring back Lon Chaney Jr. But like he brings this like sense of foreboding, the sense of loss, the sense of just not wanting to be around anymore. And like, did we put a content warning at the beginning of the show that we'd be talking about like suicide and suicidal ideation?
We did.
I don't think we did. So I'm going to add one I'm going to add one before the music. For like, again, a fairly light movie, the main theme, our main character's theme here, his goal is to die. That's all he wants to do. And it's what he can't do. Like he was at peace for 4 years because he was dead. And the only thing, he's not even seeking a cure in this movie. He's not even saying, someone take this lycanthropy away from me so I can live out my life as a normal human being, a normal man again, because that's no longer an option for him. He's saying, I don't want to live anymore. I want to be dead. That's the only way I'm ever going to be at peace.
Right.
Please kill me. That is heavy shit.
It is
for a light monster movie
and
in the 40s.
It kind of draws him back to having similarities with Karloff's version of the monster, because
Absolutely.
I mean, the Bride of Frankenstein, love dead, hate living. He's essentially wanting to destroy himself as well, and that's more or less what happens at the end of Bride, or he tries at least. But yeah, so that's one of the things about this, is that it has that dark tone that just goes through the whole thing, and even you have the musical number and it's underscoring that theme, it's pretty wild to do some of these things. Yeah.
The musical number is wonderful because you feel like it's going to be this kind of like throwaway interlude, and anything it's done to kind of like pad the running time. It
certainly feels
because
like
it is such a short time. I think it's a great, even though if it's padding, I still love it. I think it's a wondermal.
It's one of the most memorable scenes in the movie, in a way.
It really is, and it adds a bit of visual flair. It adds a touch of dynamicism to the village and the villagers overall. It gives it a really great atmosphere, and you think it's going to be just a gag. And then at the end of it, like the words, like, the words really hit home with Talbot, and he freaks out. And that's one of the core things about Talbot, is he underneath, especially when you see him at the beginning of The Wolfman, you have this calm, kind of a guy with a lot of swagger.
Yeah.
The kind of guy that will like spy a woman across the street in a telescope and then go like hit on her. Doesn't care that she has a fiance. He's like, I'm taking you to the fair tonight, like you're going to be with me. I'm taking 2 dates with me because I'm Larry fucking Talbot. That's what I do. And I love it. He's great in those moments. And that's all been taken away from him. Underneath all of that is this really scared, angry person that will lash out in a heartbeat. And he's really scary when he does. Like you can see where the beast and where that murderous impulse from the Wolfman comes from, because Larry's about to throttle this guy.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't want to live forever. I don't want life eternal. Get away from me. And everybody is looking at him like, who the fuck is this guy?
Right.
We're just
Mm-hmm.
here to drink some beer, sing and dance, dude.
Yeah.
What's up?
Absolutely. And in your Oktoberfest scene is what it feels like, to have that party crasher just kind of come into it all and remind us that, oh yeah, Larry wants to die.
That's the whole reason he's here. That's all he's doing. That's the reason he sought out Elsa Frankenstein. Like that's the crux of it. You see it on his face as soon as the bard sings "May they live eternally." You see just all the color drain from his face, and he just like he's immediately back on his heels. He's like a cornered animal in that moment, and like a cornered animal, he absolutely lashes out. Again, it's one of the things I love about the portrayal is the way that Chaney is really able to embody that animalistic nature of that character so well in both the transformed portrayal and the human portrayal as well.
Can you contrast that with the very gentle, almost, I don't even like to say like mother and son, almost like, you ever have a favorite aunt? Like you have like almost like grandmother and grandson, where you have like an older aunt or a grandmother that you really like to spend time around. Like the relationship with Talbot and Maria Ospenskaya's
Maliva,
Maliva, the Romani woman. And if we could use the term
absolutely,
Romani to speak about, let's do that when we're here. Not use the slur term that's used throughout this. Can we compare like that rage he feels versus like the very gentle nature of the relationship that he has with Maliva?
And I mean, it stems from the first film, but I think there are levels to it. On the one hand, this is the only person that knows what he's going through, that he knows, understands his pain and his struggle, because her son went through the exact same thing in the previous film. And so she has firsthand, she's the one that basically tells him all this stuff in the first film. And so he knows that if there's anyone who understands, it's her. And because of that, she's really the only person he can trust. That he knows that he can trust, and does in fact trust her implicitly with his life on many occasions. And she's, for her part, she's the one looking out for him across the board. She's the one who, when the townspeople kind of turn on her, she stands there and takes it. She stands by him, continues to stand by him. Like it is very much that, and she I think he becomes her surrogate son in a way. Like he's lost everything because of this curse that's afflicted him, and she's lost everything because of the same curse. And so it's these two broken people who find each other and find in that other person the thing that they've lost and try to rebuild it again together. And that's kind of beautiful.
She, Maria Ospenskaya, really elevates the material, I think, too, with her performances. There's lots of stereotypes thrown around in both The Wolfman and here, but she just rises above that with her performance, giving so much nuance, and I think they're really remarkable. And both films would be just so much different and worse for her not being there.
Agreed.
And it's such an indelible moment. I mean, it's brought back in like The Howling. There's the Wolfman's playing on television. George Wagner is the name of the doctor in that movie.
Oh, that's a great point.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we've talked to her a few movies, especially when we talked about the first two Frankensteins. That one of the main themes was the abdication of responsibility on the part of Henry towards his creation,
Yeah.
and like how that is so much in part responsible for why the creature behaves as it does.
Mhm.
And here you have Maliva taking responsibility to a certain extent for Larry's behavior, because Maliva is the mother of Bella,
Mhm.
who is the warehouse or Bela, the where that's how it was pronounced in the
Yeah,
Wolfman.
yeah, it would.
Correct.
No, that's right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
So she was the mother of Bela, the werewolf that passed on his affliction to Larry Talbot. So even though she's not responsible for, she was not her that passed on this curse to Larry, she assumes some responsibility for it, and she is empathetic towards him at that point. So she takes him under her wing at that point, and she does everything she can to help him find peace at that point. Unlike any of the Frankensteins, really, all of the from Henry
Wolf.
to Ludwig to
Yeah.
Wolf, all of them have just seen the creature as a means to an end, whether that be glorifying whether it be like proving to science they can do something for the sake of it, and then saying, well, that's the extent of what I wanted to do,
Mhm.
to restoring the family name, to like, I don't even know what Ludwig was trying to do, like halt a blackmail scheme by Igor, basically.
I think
Yeah.
he was also trying to restore legitimacy to the family name just by
I don't think so.
by transplanting the brain of his colleague. Yes, he was, but Igor double crosses, and it ends up
Yeah.
being ends up going.
And then you have Dr. Frank here, who's just like, I just got to see what happens,
Yeah.
man.
It's
He's
I
like,
can't destroy Frankenstein's
Mhm.
creation. You know?
He's not
He's
even
like
a
the original.
Frankenstein. He's just. I was like, there's got to be something about this lab that everybody who walks into it, because everyone's like, no, I can't do this again. I won't do this again. They go in that lab, and all of a sudden they're like, maybe I can figure it
What
out. Maybe
if?
I can get it right.
I can get it right.
He's like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I can fix him. Like he's the Patrick Knowles is the original. I can fix him.
100%.
Side note: Dr. Frank is also the name of the lead singer of the Mr. T Experience, one of the great pop punk band of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Patrick Knowles continues the tradition in Universal monster movies of being like the second male lead that has all the like very good to look at,
Mhm.
but has all the charisma of like tapioca
Yes.
pudding. Like,
Oh
yep,
man, that goes back to
you know,
David Manners and Dracula.
oh my
100%,
god,
yeah.
it's
Oh
just
gosh. Or
kind
yeah.
of like
David Manners is just like a tepid pool of water.
Oh gosh.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Patrick in the Insidious movies and the Conjuring movies, man. You
All the
know?
personality of a wet dish rag.
Oh my god, he's just like, hi, I'm handsome and boring.
Hello, I am
Missionary for
handsome,
you.
and I will assert myself upon this woman, and she will like it because I am handsome.
Yeah. And she does.
Yeah, always
She's
does.
Like, You'll
Yeah.
do. Yep.
Yeah, y'all do. Well, I can't.
All right.
Everyone else in this is an aged character actor or a monster, so I guess you're my only
Yeah.
option.
Yes, that's
Right.
it. I mean, it's going to get really weird when we get to the next movie. You should definitely watch.
Oh, I will.
House of-
I've been watching along.
Oh, nice.
I had to cram Ghost in today because that episode hasn't dropped yet, so I had to kind of cram
House
that
of
one.
Frankenstein is awesome because it's just Boris Karloff as a mad scientist.
I love that.
Just chewing scenery with a bib, like literally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The cool thing is, I own all of these movies because between my partner and I, we have like 4 or 5 of the Universal Legacy Collection sets. So I'm just like, I have the DVDs, so I didn't have Frankenstein Meets on my DVD, but I had the Wolfman set, so I just pulled out the Wolfman set, and there it is. Yep. So yeah, I've been watching along. I love these movies so much.
So, like we said, Cinemac is definitely more interested in the Larry Talbot stuff here. You can kind of be forgiven if you think like when the villagers talk about Frankenstein, that if you kind of think they're talking about Henry Frankenstein in his part in the monster's history, but they're actually talking about Ludwig, and the tales, like, it doesn't match up. Like, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Like we said, continuity spotty at
Yeah.
best.
Because
Right.
now we're in a different town than we're not in the town of Frankenstein. The town of Frankenstein, at the end of Son of Frankenstein, seems to be like, hey, everything's cool. You guys go back to America. Have a nice life. We
Well,
love you.
yeah, they run him out. They run Wolf out on a rail,
Pretty much.
which is awesome, which is
Yeah.
amazing. I love that ending.
I think the only reason
But
they don't literally run him out on the rails because he's like, look, you can have the castle, you can have the land.
Yep.
I don't care. Rename the town,
Right.
whatever. Peace.
You can have Peter,
Yeah.
Please. Take my wife. No, really.
Right. But Ghost doesn't take place on the
Right.
town of Frankenstein.
They leave at the beginning,
because
right?
they leave in the beginning. Like the monster and Igor, they like peace out. Like they go to some other random town.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why I think it's Valseria. It's like the name that like sticks in my head. It begins with some V. But those villagers are acting like the creature has ruined our town. It's brought nothing but ruin upon us. And the Frankenstein name is cursed. It's like, dude, like the Igor and the creature spent like a lovely weekend there. They carried a kid around. Frankenstein went to trial, and then he like hung out in the Ludwig's home, and then they blew up the castle.
Correct.
And that was it. And a bunch of people did get gassed to death. That is true. A bunch of people did get poison gassed. So I guess that would probably leave some scars. So I guess they do have a little bit of
technically
a right.
speaking, wasn't that Dr. Vollmer's fault?
Yeah, but I mean,
who would know? Who would know?
They would just assume
going on.
They
would just assume it was Frankenstein.
I mean, the only reason they knew that is because Ralph Bellamy busted in and started yelling about gas.
Right.
And like, because all houses just had gas that you could turn on and pipe into the halls. Like they know what the hell's going on.
Right.
Come on.
And you notice that like Elsa has not stayed with Ralph Bellamy.
I did notice
at
that.
the end of that in Ghost, she's like, she got bored with him, and his handsome face.
I mean, I watched that movie earlier today. He sounds exactly the same in Ghost as he does in Trading Places. I was cracking up every time he'd say something. I just expected him to go Mortimer, and I was losing it.
So I mentioned this earlier. Evelyn Ankers does not return to the role of Elsa because she needs to do Frozen. No, because after doing Ghost, she plays the love interest in The Wolfman, and Universal was like, that's a bridge too far for continuity. We can't possibly do that. So Ilona Massey comes in, and this is the last time like a Frankenstein will factor in a Frankenstein movie for the next 3. Even in House of Frankenstein, no Frankensteins live in that house. So this will be it for the Frankenstein legacy.
Damn.
It's for all that confusion over the monster's name, or is it Frankenstein the monster, or is the monster Frankenstein? All of that, is Universal's fault, and it goes back to Bride of Frankenstein.
Yep.
This all could have been if like Henry had just named the monster.
Yeah.
Like, your name is like I name him Steve.
Why is it gotta be Steve? Why is the monster gotta be Steve, Mike?
Well, here's the thing. I always heard that Mary Shelley said, "Oh, the monster's name is Adam." Mm-hmm. It's not in the book.
It's not.
It's one of those things that popped up. I think maybe that's in one of the movies that came along later that was supposedly
you mentioned like the real
I bet I have a feeling, I haven't even watched that one yet, but I have a feeling that he names the creature Adam in that, and everyone assumes that movie is like exactly the novel, which it is not at all. So anyway,
so the other thing too, like in terms of like some of the weirdness of this movie, like when you are with Larry Talbot, the first like third of this movie, it's very modern.
Yeah.
Right? It's modern times. And then as soon as he connects with Maleva, you get into like the Frankenstein portion of it. It again like goes out of modern times, and now you're like horse-drawn carriages again. And you have like the Oktoberfest, and it's the cobbled streets, and there's like doesn't seem to be electricity any longer except at Frankenstein's castle.
Old world. We're going back to the old
Yeah,
world.
that I think I described it before as being kind of like the oh god, I'm so sorry right now. Snow globes.
Sure.
That kind of like fairy tale
Yeah.
setting.
Frozen
Like
in
it's
time.
almost
Yeah.
a world in and of itself. And I don't think it's purposeful. I just think they didn't necessarily care.
Mm.
Well, part of it is they had
Like,
that set. They had that Europe set,
true.
there,
Mhm.
and it's still there. I mean, it burned down and they rebuilt it exactly,
Yeah.
so it's still there. And you look at it, and it's like, oh, it just looks like an old school village. So it's like, hey, let's make everything old school.
Yeah.
So
Might as well.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
it's fun to go through the tour there. You ever been to the
I think
Universal
I need to do
Hollywood?
that one day.
It's a yeah. I mean, the Court of Miracles is still there and everything. It's great. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
I could just see you just grinning ear to ear through that entire tour, just like
Oh yeah.
just the happiest you've ever been.
oh yeah, we went on it last spring, and it was just like it was fantastic.
I saw some of the pictures you
Excellent.
posted on social, and I was just like, God, good for Brian. I'm so happy for
Well,
him.
visiting the Nightmare House was something. I tell you,
I bet.
that was like standing
Excellent.
on holy ground right there. So anyway,
That's wonderful.
digressing.
Um, even the villagers, like they're ready to throw Talbot and Milvea out, like tar and feather them. And then when Elsa shows up, they roll out the red carpet for her, and she's a Frankenstein.
Yep.
Mhm.
Although she's lovely, and I kind of like her. I
Yeah.
really like her Miss Massey's performance.
I think
here.
she does a
For
lot
she
better
doesn't get it.
than Anchors does. She's got a lot more to play, I think, than Anchors did in
Yeah.
the previous film.
Yeah,
So
Mhm.
there's a little swagger there.
Mhm.
There's a little bit of swagger. I do want to say two words right now, and I think we'll talk about this next. Poor Bella.
mhm,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, what you have here is essentially, I mean, yeah, he comes back for Universal meets Frankenstein playing Dracula once again, but this is sort of like kind of the end for him as far as the majors go. Yeah,
Yeah.
he does a cameo, and it's really is just like a cameo in the Body Snatcher in 45 for RKO, but that's about it, you know.
Well, he plays Dracula again in
Yeah,
Abbott and
yeah,
Costello.
which is
Yeah.
what I just said. But it's
Oh, I'm
no,
sorry, I missed.
no, that's all good, all good. But so with those two exceptions, this is kind of it.
Mhm.
You know, and everything else that he did is sort of just the Poverty Row monogram
Repeated
pictures.
languages.
Then
Yeah.
he's off, working with Ed Wood, a
Right.
decade later.
Pull the strings.
Pull the strings. But it's just, yeah, so sad. And I think he could have been. I wish that the footage would show up in some vault in Argentina somewhere of the stuff that they cut out of this, because I'd be
Yeah.
interested to see his performance with the dialogue, with the
Same.
mentions of his blindness, because it just makes the whole movie make so much more sense. It makes his performance make so much more sense.
And that's
Yeah.
the thing. Like
Yeah.
his performance is befuddling if you haven't seen the previous movie,
Yeah.
or if you just don't remember it, like it came out a
Mhm.
year before. So, attention spans don't last that long, or maybe you missed it, whatever. But I mean, the arms out thing that becomes synonymous with Frankenstein in a way that, like, his performance as Dracula kind of set the standard for all other performances of Dracula in a weird
Yeah.
way. And this performance of Frankenstein does the same thing, but no one understands it because they cut all that dialogue. And apparently it was just because between his accent and his exhaustion, like it came out either completely unintelligible or accidentally hilarious.
It was, I don't know if it was a preview audience or an executive, like a studio executive
think-
preview audience.
My understanding is it was the executives.
They laughed it off the screen.
Yeah.
And Cedamac and Wagner said we have to cut, and they cut not only did they cut Lugosi's dialogue scenes, they cut references around his dialogue scenes,
Right.
and that's why the references to the blindness or cut reactions. And there are moments where Lugosi opens his mouth
Mhm.
and it looks like it's for no reason because there was dialogue that's there.
We have it feels like and because of that, it feels like we have 4/5 of a movie.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there are character motivations that are just lost. There are
Mhm.
there's linking, like things that link scenes to scenes that we just don't
Yeah.
have because we're missing all that stuff. Like,
Mhm.
and the entire time, every time that like Talbot is talking to the creature, it feels like there's supposed to be a dialogue scene there and he's waiting
Yeah.
for the dialogue to finish, but it's not
Yep.
coming because it just was cut out of the movie.
Yeah.
Like it just feels, it makes the whole thing feel really disjointed in a
Yeah.
way that's kind of a bummer, because I feel like this could have been this could have been so much bigger and should, I think, have been so much better, but
So
we just couldn't get that.
I'm I'm kind of the mind. I know Karloff didn't like the monster speaking at all. I think the way they utilize speech in Bride works. The
Yes.
Mhm.
short, halting phrases where the monster is learning some intelligence and you can understand what he's trying to communicate. I don't know if I want the monster in this form delivering soliloquies.
Sure.
Okay,
Right.
so I'm not sure if that way. I think that was part of it too. Is like once you see the monster, like
Hmm.
look the way it's designed, and then it's like talking about world domination. It's like think about Herman Munster, like going about his day, and you're like, okay, that is like Fred Gwynn is Herman Munster, kind of like how it comes off, except it's
Sure.
unintentional.
Right.
There was like from what I read, like the three major dialogue scenes. One of them had some potential to be like existentially very scary,
Hmm.
at least to me, like because this is one of my larger like can't fall asleep at night, this is keeping me awake. The monster describing when the monster is thawed out and they're sitting by the fire and it's describing the experience of being trapped in the ice.
Mm.
Lugosi goes on be saying like he was unable to move, but being awake the whole time and being aware the whole time, like aware of its circumstances and aware that it was trapped and being aware of the passing of time. That to me, like there's something like existentially terrifying about that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like that your brain is working and you're fully aware and your body is failed you. That is probably my deepest
Mm.
fear. So like I read that and I'm like, I don't know how it would come off given Lugosi's accent and the makeup and just the nature of the movie,
Yeah.
but done right, that could have been
And I
terrifying.
kind of wonder how Lugosi was playing this. Was he playing this trying to emulate Karloff, or was he playing Igor in the monster makeup?
I don't know.
That's, I think, a good question.
I think
And
so too.
yeah, because I mean, if he's playing Igor in the monster makeup, I think there's potential for that to work.
I agree.
But we wouldn't know because the footage is long gone and it's never coming back. But it's just one of those fascinating, what ifs. What if we
Right.
saw that happen? So
Hmm.
yeah, I'm really curious how he played it.
I like the idea of and at the end of Ghost, I was excited for the prospect of, this kind of almost Dr. Hulk kind of like
Sure.
evil genius inside of the mind of this like kind of hulking monster. But then like, does that time in the ice kind of like chill him out? Does it, no pun intended, but does it kind of mellow his mind to where like he's this kind of criminally insane individual, and all that time kind of like quiets his mind and stills him and like centers him in a weird way, or does he go completely unhinged?
Yeah.
And we'll never know.
I don't think you get any of
No,
that.
we'll never know.
So I think what you get is Lugosi. It comes across like Lugosi playing the monster exactly like he did not want to play him and why he turned down the role in 1931 because he thought like any stuntman can play this. It's like a babbling lunatic or a babbling goon
Right.
that like
Sure.
is mute and just kind of shambling about. Like, why would I want to do this? I'm above this role. Like
Yeah.
Lugosi felt he should be playing the role of Henry Frankenstein. And when we did that, we discussed that movie. I was of the mindset like that would come across more like Peter Cushing in the Hammer movies, where Henry would now be far more
Yeah.
sinister, whereas in the James Whale movies, like Henry comes across as a bit mad, but also far more sympathetic.
Yeah.
Like kind of unaware of like, oh my lord, what have I done?
Yeah. Well, part of the
You would not have
genius.
gotten that with Lugosi.
Yeah, part of the genius of that movie is that with maybe the exception of Fritz, there are no traditional villains in that movie,
Yeah.
and
even Fritz is cruel to the monster.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he's a villain.
That's a good. Yeah,
he's like the big brother lashing out at little brother because he feels like he's going to be replaced.
the one person that he has power over, in the whole wide world. Yeah, so there's lots of those. We talked about the class struggles and stuff of that movie. Yeah,
like I don't know if you guys have like younger siblings.
No, I don't.
So would you have when you brought home your little brother, when they brought home your younger brother or sister, like that jealousy you feel when they bring them home for the first time, and now they are the center of your parents' attention, and you're no longer the center of your parents' world, and like you want to lash out to a certain degree, and like that's Fritz doing that in that moment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is why I don't see him so much as a villain, even though what he's doing is very cruel to the monster.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, you had some thoughts as well, Stephen, about how they're asking Lugosi to play the monster compared to like the Karloff representation.
Right. I'm curious, like in terms of like comparison, and I feel like I don't think it's even fair to make a comparison between Lugosi's portrayal and the two that we've seen previously from Karloff and Chaney, because we don't really get all of Lugosi's performance here. Like,
true,
we only get kind of a smattering or a snippet of it. But like, how do if we can compare them, like how does Lugosi compare to the two previous incarnations of the creature? Like, how would you guys compare those performances?
Honestly, I mean, Karloff is far and away my favorite performance. I think
100%.
Yeah, for me, it's sort of like when they. And my least favorite is actually Chaney. I think it was sort of like, hey, he fits the suit. It's sort of the same kind of experience they had, with the stuntman, bringing a stuntman for Nightmare 2, and Robert Englund and it was just wrong. It's like, Robert Englund was Freddy, and that's kind of the way it is with Karloff. Karloff was the monster. No one ever played it as well as he did. It's
sure
in this series. I mean, I think you could make arguments for Christopher Lee and various things like that. That's a different subject. But as far as this iteration of the creature, Karloff was the epitome of it, and I think Karloff, you could even rank his performances within that series. I think.
Oh yes.
I think the Monster and Bride or Frankenstein and Bride are about equal, but Son's a little below that. And part of it is because James Whale wasn't there, helping to mold that performance too.
Karloff didn't really think much of that movie either, so he was kind of phoning it in.
Yeah. But Lugosi, I think, is kind of onto something. He's at least trying to continue what happened in the previous movie.
Right. He at least is concerned about continuity, even if the studio isn't.
Right. And I think that he's trying to, tap into some of that empathy that Karloff did. Think whatever the legends, whether they're true or not, about the rivalry between Karloff, and we've talked about this already, Karloff and Lugosi. I mean, I think Lugosi was at least respected him enough as an actor to say, hey, he tapped into something with this character. I'm going to see if I can get a little something of that and bring it here. And I think he does to some extent. I think he's probably, after Karloff, the best, and then maybe Glenn Strange and Chaney, because Chaney just didn't seem to understand it at all to me.
I feel like
Chaney is mute.
Yeah.
I mean, like Chaney literally doesn't make a sound.
He hardly moves his face during the whole.
So
until the Lugosi dialogue at the end.
Right. Yeah.
Which is
odd.
Bizarre. I didn't know when they transplant your brain, they also
Your vocal
transplant
cords and everything.
your vocal cords as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, that's one of
What's
the bizarre sorts of ideas.
what's fascinating is like Glenn Strange is going to play the monster next, and Karloff is on set
Yeah,
because he's playing the mad scientist.
Right.
And like Karloff actually like tutored Glenn Strange a bit. Like Karloff was very gracious and was like, "Here's how I would play it." But Strange plays the monster like Lugosi does,
Yeah.
and like that is the portrayal that you're going to get. And it said like later on, like and Steven, you said this, like when you think of the monster in pop culture, you think of the stiff-legged, arms out,
Right.
shambling walk.
Mm-hmm.
The monster kits that were out
Mhm.
in the 70s and 80s seem to be based on
Glenn Strange.
Lugosi's look
Mhm.
of the monster, not Karloff. So for some reason, Lugosi's obviously doesn't overtake Karloff.
No.
For a lot of reasons, but it's stuck.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because like this movie as a whole is a step above, but something about the performance like stuck. He makes a little bit of a meal out of like the very bare ingredients that he was given to work with.
Right.
And I think there's something commendable about that because he was not done any favors by the studio, given that they like hacked his performance to pieces.
Right.
And we don't know, like we don't even get deleted scenes where we can go back and see, we can be judges for ourselves to say, this is how it is with the dialogue.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a real big bummer because that's something I would love to see, and because again I feel like we only get half of his performance in this movie. The only sounds we hear him make are the grunts and the growls and the scream.
Yeah, it's
that kind of close-up image of him just snarling during the fight scenes. Like that's kind of all we get from him, unfortunately. And I just knowing Lugosi as an actor, knowing why he was so reticent to take the role in 31 and his reasonings for that, to see that this is what they do to his performance just feels like the ultimate insult to that man of such pride.
Yeah. And I know I want to pick up that book you recommended.
Yeah, I just gotta pull the trigger and buy that one. I just gotta. It's called The Traveler Returns. I think it's called. It's the lost years of Bela Lugosi. So the years that he between when he made his last film and before Ed Wood picked him up. So it's sort of the nether world time where he was wandering in the desert, I guess you could say.
Yep.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So
putting that on my list.
We've talked Frankenstein. We've talked the Wolfman. We're going to talk about bringing these two together.
Yeah.
And only one man can do that. And that is that giant bowl of tapioca, Dr. Frank. And Brian, you have some notes on how this works. Something about polarity.
Well, it's the dialogue was essentially lifted from this and put into Young Frankenstein, because there's a scene where, what's his name in the movie? I know Frankenstein, but what's Gene Wilder's character? I can't. Anyway, he's reading.
Look it up. Hang on.
He's reading the book and he's reading it aloud. And Igor and Terry Garr's character Inga are sitting there just like falling asleep. And he goes, "If you change the plus to minus and the minus to plus, it could work."
Frederick
Frankenstein. But it's just like, so that's essentially what he says, something about changing the polarity and it's just like, it's nonsense. It's completely ridiculous. And it's, I don't know. I just found it really like laughable, because now we look back at this all of these movies, let's face it, we look at all of these movies through the lens of Mel Brooks now. I mean,
We do.
Yep.
sorry, you know, at the end of Bride of Frankenstein, of the hermit scene in Bride of Frankenstein, we're thinking, wait, I was going to make espresso. You know, I mean,
I've never seen Sun before, and
Yeah.
when I saw that movie and I saw the inspector, I was just like, oh my god, that's a real character. Like that
Yeah.
wasn't just a thing Ken Mars made up, because
And
it totally
Ken-
seems like a thing Ken Mars
I
would
know.
make up.
And the thing is, Ken Mars doesn't even change it that much.
He really doesn't.
It's crazy. Anyway,
insane.
so I mean, we've talked a lot about Young Frankenstein in this series.
Yeah.
It just keeps coming up because
I just might like cut it all together
Yeah.
and like call it a bonus
there you
episode
go.
and
We could do
Pass it
two
off
bonus
as
episodes
one.
for this series, right?
Yeah.
Gods and Monsters and Young Frankenstein.
do
Yeah.
that.
That'd
We
be
could do
fun.
that.
We'd probably get a
I think the
lot of
problem
takers
is-
on Young Frankenstein.
We absolutely, I'm sure we would. Maybe one or two other people for Gods and Monsters, but
Figure something out.
yeah, the whole gauntlet for a Young Frankenstein, I'm sure.
So again, don't know Dr. Frank's motivations except for like it just like wants to see chaos reign,
Yeah.
essentially. I can't destroy Frankenstein's monster. It's like you can't. Why can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for what reason?
No logic.
Like because he had never heard of the monster before, like until like an hour ago.
Right.
You know, it wasn't.
You know,
like
I
he
got
has
to give
any
credit to Dr.
long-standing-
Waldman here because he was the one guy who was willing to actually destroy the monster.
He's like,
Yeah.
this is a bad idea.
It's like,
He's
and it's like, I'm
the one man-
just gonna dismantle him. Everything will be fine, and you know,
The one man unswayed by the allure of that laboratory.
yeah,
right. He's
yeah.
like, this creature's not a good idea. And, you know, he just has the not good idea to like, let me stay here alone with it.
Right.
And,
right.
get choked to
Sure.
death. Not smart, Edward Van Sloan. So he brings it to life during a full moon, of
Of
course.
course.
And you get a full moon like one night a month.
Right.
Right. So like pick any other day.
hmm
Right? Like you look at the calendar and you're like, what day should I do it? Not the day of the full moon.
Yeah.
And not at night. Like, why does it have to be?
Particularly because he knows there's a
night.
werewolf around. Like he's
Right.
literally been following him all over the countryside.
Yeah.
Like he knows there's one around.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And one thing what I love about the Wolfman and Universal, they let the Wolfman be a monster. Like the
Yeah.
Wolfman kills people,
hmm
Straight up.
chomps on people. It's bloody. And you know, what I also love about the Wolfman, he changes his clothes before he goes a killing.
Mhm.
Like he'll be in a white shirt, pants, and he's like, I'm gonna change. I'm gonna run off. I'm also gonna change into my little kind of
My
like
plaids.
chambray, my little plaids, you know, my
My lumberjack
nice
uniform.
cranberry colored shirt,
Yeah.
you know. So because the blood won't stain on that shirt, you know.
But then
I
he's so
love that.
considerate that he changes back when he transforms back to his
does.
human form, which is just considerate,
You know?
really considerate.
None of this David waking up naked in the zoo,
Right.
and stealing balloons from children,
No.
and stealing old ladies' coats.
That's just
and
indecent, is
a
what
lot
that
of
is.
lot of weather we've been having. None of that bullshit. Lon Chaney keeping it real,
right.
keeping it fashionable.
Well, that's like, you know, the Hulk in his pants thing.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and it's
Always gotta be
the
wearing
eternal
purple pants.
debate. Yes.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
So both of the monsters wake up cranky because they've been zapped with like 10,000 volts of electricity.
Mhm.
So that is going to make you cranky,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Well, and
What
that
do we
scene
think?
again, Young Frankenstein, because they're on those tilting tables. They're next to each other. They've got the
Yep.
stuff attached to their heads. You know, I
Mhm.
mean, it's all lifted directly from there. Yeah.
Aside from being short, what do we think of this fight?
It's okay.
Yeah,
It
it's
did-
all right.
I was really disappointed the first
Well,
time I
alright.
saw it. I'm sorry. I'm
Okay,
sorry to say.
no.
But however, it kind of set a precedent. I mean, this one's really short. This one's like 2 minutes. But
Mhm.
but
It starts at 110. The film ends at 113.
right. And you know, and the thing is, you know, when the things that sort of copied this in the future, King Kong versus Godzilla, that's a lot of King Kong doing his thing, a lot of Godzilla doing his thing, and then the fight isn't very long. Same with
Right.
Freddy versus Jason. You know, lots of Freddy, lots of Jason, and then when they get together, it's like, okay. So this was just a thing that just sort of continued through. I mean, all of those go longer than this, but they just sort of
Uh-huh.
wrestle, you know, and I don't know.
There's like, I mean, you know, we get like some jumping, like the Wolfman's like jumping on him from high places, and they're
Yeah,
kind of knocking each other into stuff and rolling around. But it's not like it's not like super well choreographed in the sense that like, you know, we're doing fight choreography and the filmmaking is built around it. We're just we're setting up a wide shot, and the direct Neil's just kind of like, I don't know, go nuts, guys. Like kind of like you said, Mike. Like he just kind of would film what they came up with, and it
Kind of a street fight,
yeah, and it feels very much like that.
yeah,
which I like.
I wish there were more of it because
Yeah.
you know, but then it kind of ends like
Abruptly.
like Deus Ex Machina, water from the
Right.
machine. Like the guy who's been, you know, shit talking Frankenstein the whole movie just decides he's going to commit an act of domestic terrorism and blows up the dam and like floods the castle or whatever.
To be fair, to be absolutely fair, I knew because he lost his daughter, like in
That's true.
the attack on the village, and you have that scene where he's carrying her in one, and it's meant to kind of like recall the scene of Hans carrying Maria
Sure.
through the village. It just doesn't have any of that same gravitas that Whale does. It doesn't have that same sort of like, it's not nearly as stunning.
Do we even see her
It's just
die?
kind of flat. No.
And I mean,
not to my knowledge,
that's
don't.
part of it though. Like it would just this character that we've kind of seen in a couple of long shots, and then all of a sudden she's dead, draped over her father's arms, and it just, okay, who cares?
But you understand why. And he was the one that he tossed out Mileva from and Talbot from he's been team anti-Frankenstein from the get-go. So he's consistent.
Yeah.
He also looks like Andy Reid, coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. A little walrus mustache and everything.
You know I love a good walrus mustache.
So, and he's up there and he's like planting his dynamite and he's like, fuck it. I'm blowing these like he's kind of like Milton in Office Space. He's like, I'm gonna blow the place up, and everyone's like, sure, dude. And he's a man of his word. Kind of disappointing. Like nobody knows what happens to Mileva.
Right.
Like she's there, and like I think someone actually asked Cinemac, like, what happened to Mileva? He's like, I don't know. Like she washed away in the water. Like, why are you bothering me with this detail? Like it's not real. But again, it's a character that you've gotten to know for two. She's the most sympathetic character in the movie.
Well, it is kind of surprising because, like you mentioned earlier, giving a reason for the body not being discovered in the tomb at the beginning. And so this other detail, he's like, whatever.
Yeah.
So I like the fight for what it is. I know it's short. I don't know if you're going to have like a 15-minute long fight with these.
And I don't know that I want that either, but just something I don't know, it just feels very narratively unsatisfying. It's like we're gonna punch each other for a little bit, it's gonna flood, and we're done. Like I mean, that flood starts and we are out of there. Like we're not wasting any fucking time. Like you look, you saw them get along, you saw them fight, it floods, we're done.
Well, one of the problems, that's true. One of the narrative questions was who's going to win, because if you have Frankenstein win, you're going to disappoint Wolfman fans. If Wolfman wins, you're going to disappoint Frankenstein fans. So what's your answer? Kill them both.
Nobody.
Well, and it's the Godzilla versus or King Kong. It's the Freddy versus Jason.
King Kong wins. Technically speaking, King Kong wins. No, in both cuts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've seen both cuts, and he wins. King Kong wins, and the reason why is because Godzilla was not yet a hero at that point. He was still the villain at that point.
Oh,
yeah.
King Kong in that looks
awful.
Terrible.
It is the
really
worst design of King Kong.
It's like a paper.
Ever.
It's like a lunch sack.
With
some hair taped to it.
Yeah, I had heard forever that Godzilla wins in the Japanese cut, and I finally saw it and I was like, no, that's not what happens. It was fascinating. So anyway.
But I mean, okay, so most of these then it's very difficult to put one on top of the other.
Alien versus Predator, another example there. Yeah, that's right, because you can't have whoever wins, we lose.
Yeah. This is when Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, There's a little bit of fighting that goes on, but like Frankenstein, he's in this movie, he's really in the background.
Yeah.
And in the next 3 movies, like he really is he's comic relief,
Mhm.
and as all of them are in the next. I mean, like the Wolfman gets a noogie in the, which we'll talk about. All right, so I think we've done it. You've got pancakes to eat. I am not going to keep a man from eating
All right.
pancakes. I want some
I kind of do
pancakes.
too now.
Yeah, a little bit.
I
jealous
ordered.
now.
Well, I ordered an omelet. So yeah.
Of course you
What?
did.
Yeah. Lots
Look
of
at you being all healthy and
like
shit.
all
Chocolate
all
chip
sorts of
omelet.
meat. You know, like
Oh, okay.
Chocolate chip
like
omelet.
the extra meat omelet, all the breakfast
Okay.
meats omelet.
Oh,
So it'll be good.
Excellent.
It'll be good.
so Mike said something
Very
about how
good.
the sausage was made earlier. You didn't want to hear that because you're getting ready to have a bunch of
That's
sausage.
right.
So.
You know it.
Sausage.
Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of how the sausage gets made, why don't we tell everybody what sausage we're making with all of our other projects?
Wow. You throw your shoulder out with all that reaching you just did?
That was
really-
amazing.
That was incredible.
I just did by
Yeah.
patting myself on the back. That was pretty damn good, Stephen.
I agree. That was pretty damn good.
Yeah.
So, Stephen, what's going on with Disenfranchised?
We just wrapped up, I think a couple weeks ago, as of the listening of this episode, our Kingening, the drawing of 3 miniseries where we took on 3 Stephen King failed franchise starters. We're heading into February, which has no rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
I think we covered The Spy Who Dumped Me most recently. And I think our next episode as of this release is going to be your episode, Mike, where you're coming on to talk about the 2017 Turkish or Indonesian superhero film Valentine. So
Excellent.
because you are our annual Valentine guest. That's just
When do we record that one?
soon.
Okay.
We'll
Definite
talk.
answers there.
We'll
yeah,
talk.
that's good.
Love it.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Brian, and Stephen, where can they find you on the socials?
I am at Chewy Walrus. I don't know. Find me. And then the podcast is at Disenfranch Pod on those same
Excellent.
socials. So yeah.
And you'll be back here for Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein.
Oh, also Brian was talking Tubi earlier, talking shit about Tubi earlier.
No, I love Tubi.
The movie that I was in, Circle City Supernatural, is now on Tubi. So you can
Excellent.
Or Circle City Supernatural.
Circle City Supernatural. It's if you like micro budget horror, it's an anthology horror movie, micro budget, amateur actors. It's a lot of fun. If you're into that kind of thing, very little blood and gore. You can watch it with the kids. It's fun. Check it out.
Brian, what's going on with? We'll talk, Steve.
Sure.
Brian, what's going on with?
Well,
Should I cut that? Do you want me to cut that, Steve?
Probably.
Okay, I will cut that. I don't mean to. I'm sorry that I am.
No, you're fine. I honestly, you can keep the initial question. Just like all the when you start hassling me about figures, that might be where you cut. But yeah.
Okay, Brian, what is the? I'll cut all of it because I don't think I would ask any of the ladies that question.
Fair.
So
I mean,
we'll
I really don't
not
care. But yeah.
I know, but it's still harassment. I should not do that
All right,
to you. I apologize.
That's fine.
Brian, same question. No, not the same question. I'm sorry.
No, this is too much fun.
What is going on with Movies for Life?
Okay, with Movies for Life, we couple of things that I'm sure are available out there. All of our discoveries are available on the feed now. So our favorite discoveries and our top movies of 2023 are out there. Our Snowbound episode with The Grey, a great underrated action animal attack movie, and Fargo should be available as well. And next up, we're looking forward. We're coming out a little bit before the actual movie comes out, the Imaginary movie, and we're doing our own Imaginary Friends episode with Harvey and Drop Dead Fred.
Yes.
So that'll be a lot of fun. And as far as me and my writing, I just had my latest Gods and Monsters piece go up, which is on Gojira from 1954, and I'm particularly happy with how that one turned out. I feel
Very
really
cool.
good about that one, and also the second half of my Hammer Frankenstein series should be hitting Manor Vellum sometime during February. And as far as where you can find me across the socials and on Letterboxd at Brian Waves 42, and the show that I co-host with Michelle Egan at Movie Life Pod.
Excellent. Thank you,
You bet.
Brian. Well, folks, you know where you can find us. Make sure you visit our site, podandthependulum.com, where all of our previous episodes, all 218 now, are up, where you can find them and search them very easily. You can also leave us like comments on there as well. Which is a really nice way. You've got some really nice notes from listeners there. I've gone through them. Didn't realize people were leaving comments up there. We got some really nice notes from some listeners, and it was nice to go back and respond to them. Also got like some like spam mail for like some weird like body creams from Russia,
Oh, nice.
which I did not respond to.
Oh.
Are we gonna?
But that's okay.
Are they gonna sponsor the show?
No. But that's okay. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. That goes a super long way to helping new listeners find us. And it's a free way to support us. If you can become a patron, please do at patreon.com/PodandThePendulum. Stephen and I just recorded our Oscar thoughts in terms of the nominations. We had a lot of fun.
We do.
Recording that
I
one.
wish I
Gave
could
our
have
thoughts
jumped
on all
in
the
with you
major-
guys. I had a thought.
That's okay. Well, maybe we'll do something for the Oscars. We'll
Sure.
talk about it. So
That'd be fun.
for the month of February, we'll be getting into the back half of the Frankenstein episodes. We have a few left. And then we'll be doing our next series, which will be Paranormal Activity. Ari is going to be assisting with that one as well. So we're really excited.
Excellent.
I am super excited because I love a handful of those movies dearly. Valentine's Day is coming up. I'm going to talk to the crew about maybe doing a bonus show, like maybe some of the folks that haven't been able to jump on Frankenstein, maybe doing an episode where we talk about the worst breakups in horror movie history, some heartache. Maybe we can do something fun like that as a bonus. We'll see. But for now, we are out of here. Thank you so much, Brian, Stephen. It is always a pleasure.
It is.
Because we have some
Absolutely.
laughs, but you guys just know so much about movies. I always get an education talking to you both, and I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful day, listeners. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with the House of Frankenstein. It's a fun one. It really is a goddamn pleasure. Take care. All right now, Stephen.
I mean, fair. I'd still have to probably take the red line because I don't want to have to mess with parking down there.
So you're experiencing Chicago winters now, huh?
I am.
That's-
I did last year too because I moved
Oh,
up
that-
here in January.
Oh,
so,
that's
you know.
right. That's right. It's you.
So, are you saying that you're too good to ride public transportation?
No, it's just it can be a hassle.
All this needs to stay in the show. This is how we start the show. Just like
Let's
Definitely.
just tack this onto the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stays in the
Yeah.
show.
Make this the stinger.
This definitely stays in the show. You should definitely take a ball game in at Wrigley Field.
I might one day.
You should definitely. And just do the Ferris Bueller. Hey,
Hey,
bada. So
wee.
Bada.
Bye. Got it.
Anyway.
All right. All right, listeners. You'll get that at the end, probably.